3 years. That was how long Seraphina Voss had been gone. Not missing, not lost. Gone. The way people go when they choose to disappear. When staying becomes more dangerous than the road. The palace had moved on. Palaces always do. Alpha King Dorian Blackmane stood at the altar on a cold Saturday morning in November and married Isolde Crestwood in front of 500 wolves who clapped at the right moments and smiled at the right times. The ceremony was perfect. The flowers were white. The music was chosen by a committee. Dorian held Isolde's hand when the elder spoke the binding words, and he waited. He waited for the thing every wolf knows. That pull, that deep and ancient recognition that says her. This one, always her. The thing that had nearly broken him 3 years ago, when he first stood close enough to Seraphina to understand what his wolf had always known. It did not come. He said the words anyway. Isolde was not his true mate, and she knew it. And he knew it. And they had agreed, in a private meeting 6 weeks before the wedding, over tea that neither of them drank, to build something real from something incomplete. She was intelligent. She was composed. She had no illusions about love. Neither, anymore, did he. Beta Marcus stood behind him at the altar and said nothing. Marcus had always been good at saying nothing. It was one of his most exhausting qualities. The kingdom celebrated for 3 days. Dorian smiled until his face ached. 8 months into the marriage, Isolde restructured the southern trade routes and resolved a border conflict with the Ironhaven Pack that Dorian had been avoiding for 2 years. She did it with calm and precision, and without raising her voice once. He told her she had done well. He meant it. She thanked him the way you thank someone you respect but do not love. It was a quiet life, orderly, safe. Dorian rode out without ceremony on a Tuesday morning in early spring because the silence in the palace had started sounding like something out, and he needed wind and open road to remind himself it was nothing. He rode to Aldermore, the neutral territory market, a place where packs mingled without politics, where vendors sold salt and dried herbs and cloth, and didn't ask who your alpha was. He was not looking for anything. He never was, on the mornings that changed everything. He smelled her before he saw her. It was not a gentle thing, that recognition. It was not soft or romantic in the way people describe such moments when they are telling the story later, when the painful parts have been smoothed down by time. It was a collision. His wolf, the ancient sovereign creature that lived beneath his skin and had been quiet for 3 years, quiet in the specific way of something holding its breath, went completely still. Then it came apart. He was standing near the grain stalls when it happened. He turned before he understood why he was turning, and he saw a woman's back first. A coat too large for her, dark wool, worn at the elbows. 2 infants strapped to her chest in a double carrier, one asleep, chin tucked down, small mouth open. The other one awake, watching him, with eyes the precise color of his own. Dorian did not move. He was not sure he was breathing. She was arguing with the salt vendor about price. She was winning. He could tell from the vendor's expression that she had been winning for several minutes, and showed no sign of stopping. Then the wind shifted. She went still. Not the stillness of someone who heard a sound, the stillness of someone who recognized something they had been both dreading and rehearsing for a very long time. She turned around. She looked at him. She looked exactly like herself, which was somehow the thing he had least prepared for. "Dorian," she said. Just his name, nothing attached to it. His name in her mouth like something she had kept in a locked place and was only now allowing herself to say out loud. He said, "Seraphina." The baby with his eyes kept watching him. They sat in a borrowed room above the market. Wooden table, 2 chairs. Someone had left a half-burned candle on the windowsill. The twins slept in the carrier she had set on the table between them. They slept the way infants do, completely, as if sleeping is a serious occupation requiring full commitment. She did not make him ask. She told him everything in the flat and steady voice of someone who had rehearsed this conversation 100 times and understood that none of the rehearsals had been accurate. 3 years ago, she had known she was pregnant 2 days before the Council of Elders came to her with their offer. The offer was money, at first, a significant amount, enough to live quietly somewhere far from the kingdom, Far from the pack politics. Far from him. They called it a transition arrangement. They used careful language the way people do when they know what they are proposing is wrong, but have decided it is necessary. She had refused. They came back with something else. If she stayed, if she remained in the kingdom, visibly pregnant, unmated, unaligned with any pack, they would move against the children. They had the legal language ready. Illegitimate heirs of an Omega without pack standing. They would strip the children of Wolf right before they were born. Foster them to border packs before they could walk. And Dorian, new to the throne, mid-ascension, dependent on council approval, for 3 more pieces of legislation that would determine the shape of his reign, they believed he would not fight hard enough, fast enough, to stop it. Seraphina had looked at the elder who delivered this message and understood, with total clarity, that they might be right. Not about Dorian. She had never doubted him. About what the crown would cost him if he chose her. She left before sunrise. She did not leave a note because she did not trust that a note would reach him before the council did. She had been in the Northern Free Territories since then. A small community, people who did not ask questions. Work she could do with her hands. She had built something small and sufficient, and had told herself, on the hard nights, that sufficient was enough. She looked at him across the table. "I didn't trust what fighting for me would cost you," she said. "I trusted you. I didn't trust the crown." He was quiet for a long time. "What are their names?" he asked. "Elia," she said, "and Kale." He closed his eyes, opened them. "Kale has your jaw," she said. "He has your stubbornness," Dorian said. It was the first thing in 3 years that had felt like them. Marcus arrived by nightfall. He stood in the doorway of the borrowed room, looked at Seraphina, looked at the twins, looked at Dorian, and said, "I see." "You knew," Dorian said, "not a question." Marcus said nothing for a moment. Then, "I knew she left. I didn't know why until later. When I found out why." He stopped, started again. "I made a decision I believed was protective. I believed you would burn the kingdom down, and the children would still end up in border packs, and Seraphina would be gone regardless." Dorian looked at his beta for a long time. "We will discuss that," he said. "Yes," Marcus said, "we will." It was not forgiveness. It was not a fight. It was something that would take a long time to resolve. And both of them understood that, and set it aside, because there were more immediate things. Marcus left to arrange proper accommodations. Seraphina fed Elia, who had woken up with strong opinions about the delay. Dorian sat on the floor of the borrowed room with his back against the wall and watched his daughter eat, and felt something shift inside him that had no name but was large. Isolde knew the moment he returned. She did not ask. She watched his face in the entrance hall and understood everything that had changed in the hours he had been gone, and she called for Marcus that same evening. Marcus told her, all of it, the true mate bond, Seraphina, the children, the council's involvement 3 years ago. Isolde sat in the chair across from him and was very still for a very long time. Then she stood, poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the cabinet by the window, handed one to Marcus, and sat back down. "I need a week," she said. Marcus drank his whiskey. "You have it." "The children are legitimate," she said. It was not a question. "By wolf law, yes. Unambiguously. The council will argue otherwise. The council argues everything." Isolde looked at her glass. "I am not the villain of this story, Marcus." "No," he said, and he meant it. "You are not." Someone talked. Someone always does. In palaces, in packs, in any place where information is currency. By Thursday, the whisper had spread through 3 packs. The Alpha King's true mate had returned. She had children, his children, and the Luna sat on a throne that had never been meant for her. The council convened in emergency session on Friday morning. Dorian sat at the head of the long table and let them speak. He was good at this, at the stillness, at the patience, at the deliberate calm that made people say things they would later regret because they mistook his quiet for agreement. Elder Marin spoke for 11 minutes about political stability. Elder Crow spoke for 8 minutes about bloodline legitimacy and the importance of proper documentation. Elder Voss, no relation to Seraphina, a coincidence that satisfied absolutely no one in the room, stood up and used the word relocation 3 times in reference to the children. Dorian waited until he finished. Then he said, very quietly, that any individual who moved against his children would find themselves answering to wolf law, which was the oldest legal authority in the kingdom and which superseded council jurisdiction in matters of bloodline and true mate recognition. He said he had never invoked wolf law in his 3 years on the throne, because he preferred to govern with consent. He said he was prepared to prefer it no longer. The room was silent. Marcus, standing against the far wall, studied the ceiling with great interest. Seraphina stayed in the protected quarters on the east wing. This was a practical decision, not a romantic one. She made that clear. The twins needed stability, and the east wing had better light in the mornings. She did not make anything easy for him, and he did not ask her to. He came to her room on the second night and knocked. She found this almost interesting, that he knocked, that he waited, that he came alone, without advisors or protocol. She let him in. He sat on the floor because there was one chair, and she was in it. Elia and Kale were asleep in a crib that Marcus's mate had sent over, with an accompanying package of supplies, so thorough, it was clearly the work of someone who had been waiting a long time to be useful. Dorian looked at the twins for a while without speaking. "I would have fought for you," he said finally, "not with anger. The way you state something that is simply true, and costs you something to say." "I know," she said. "You didn't trust." "I trusted you completely," she said. "I didn't trust what the fight would leave of you, or of them." She looked at the crib. "I made a decision. I would make it again." He absorbed this. "I married her," he said. "I know. She's a good woman." "I know that too." He was quiet again, long enough that Kale stirred and made a small protesting sound in his sleep, and both Dorian and Seraphina went completely still, in the particular way of parents who have learned that the wrong movement can undo 20 minutes of effort. Kale settled. They both exhaled. "What do you want?" Dorian asked. "Not what you'll accept. What do you actually want?" Nobody had asked her that question in 3 years. She looked at her children. She looked at him on the floor of her room, this king who had ridden without ceremony to a market town and found the thing he had stopped letting himself look for. She told him the truth. He listened to all of it. Isolde requested a private meeting with Seraphina on the 6th day. No Marcus, no advisors, no witnesses. They met in the small solar off the east wing, where the morning light came in wide and honest and made everything look exactly as it was. They looked at each other. 2 women in a situation that had not been designed with any kindness toward either of them. Isolde spoke first. She said she had spent 8 months being excellent at a role that had never fit. She had done good work. She named it clearly, without apology, the trade routes, the Iron Haven resolution, the 3 domestic policies she had drafted that were already showing results. She had governed well. She was not willing to pretend that was nothing. She said she understood wolf law and true mate bonds and what they meant. She said she was not broken by any of this. She was, however, unwilling to simply disappear. She would consent to dissolution. That was her right under wolf law, and she was choosing to exercise it willingly, not under pressure. Her terms, the title of royal envoy to the Southern Territories, a formal seat at the diplomatic table, and a public acknowledgement, stated clearly, on record, that she had governed well during her time as Luna. She looked at Seraphina. Seraphina said, "You should have that and more." Isolde said, "That sounds like flattery." Seraphina said, "It's observation. You stabilized 3 regions in 8 months. That's not a consolation prize. That's a career." Something opened between them. Not friendship, not yet, but the first door of it, unlocked. The council contested the dissolution. Of course they did. Dorian invoked wolf law on a Wednesday morning. It was the first invocation in 60 years. It was loud, it was clean. 3 elders resigned in protest and were replaced by the end of the month. The recognition ceremony for Elia and Kale was small, fewer than 30 people. No committee had chosen the flowers. Marcus cried and denied it afterward with impressive commitment. Seraphina stood beside Dorian, not behind him. He had asked where she wanted to stand. She had told him. He had said, "Beside me then." Like it was simple. Like it had always been the answer. Up. The bond closed between them not in ceremony, and not in front of anyone. It happened at 2 in the morning, outside the nursery, when Cale refused to sleep with the passionate commitment of someone who had decided sleep was for people with less important things to think about. Dorian had heard him through the wall, and appeared in the doorway in an unremarkable shirt and bare feet, looking like a king who had completely forgotten he was a king. Seraphina was walking small circles with Cale against her shoulder. Dorian held out his arms. She transferred the baby. Their hands touched in the handoff. Just that. Just the ordinary contact of passing a small, unhappy person from one set of arms to another, and the bond arrived. Not like thunder. Not like the stories described. Like a light coming on in a room that had been dark for 3 years. Like something that had been waiting with extraordinary patience, finally deciding the waiting was finished. Cale stopped crying. He looked up at Dorian with those familiar eyes, and then, apparently satisfied with whatever conclusion he reached, closed them, and went to sleep in under a minute. Seraphina watched this happen. "He's never done that," she said. "He knows," Dorian said. She looked at him. He looked at her. Outside, the pack slept under a sky going slowly pale at the edges. Inside, a king stood in a hallway holding his son and looking at the woman who had loved him enough to leave, and had come back not for him but for the children, and had ended up in front of him anyway because some things do not care how carefully you plan around them. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. It was not a promise to him. It was a fact she was saying out loud to make it real. "I know," he said. He meant it as more than an answer. She understood it as more. The kingdom held, the children slept, and in the slow and practical way that real things are built, without ceremony, without perfection, with 2 people deciding every morning to try, they began.